Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless Official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Adam Newman had always feared the universe would eventually rip the last piece of stability from his hands, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for the moment Chelsea Lawson stood in front of him with tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling as she whispered, "I have to tell you everything," because in that instant, even before the truth spilled out, even before the words took shape, Adam felt something inside him buckle, a tightness in his chest that warned him the life he thought he understood was about to shatter beyond recognition, and as Chelsea reached into her purse with shaky fingers to pull out the DNA envelope, Adam's world tilted, time slowed, air thickened, and the thundering of his heart made it nearly impossible to hear her soft, breaking voice as she admitted that Connor's recent struggles, his emotional spiral, his confusion and distance, were not solely rooted in trauma or stress but in a truth she'd buried for years, one she had prayed would never surface, one that now demanded to be acknowledged because science had closed the door on lies forever, and when she finally pressed the paper into Adam's hand, urging him to read it, urging him to understand before he exploded, Adam ripped the results open with the desperation of a man drowning, his eyes racing across the words that confirmed what Chelsea had been too afraid to speak. Matt's DNA matched Connor's, not partially, not suspiciously, but directly, conclusively, undeniably, and Adam felt the blood drain from his face, his breath catching violently as reality slammed into him like a freight train, because this wasn't some misunderstanding or some clerical mistake, this was betrayal carved into genetic code, betrayal inked in the very blueprint of the boy he had raised, loved, and fought for more fiercely than anything else in his existence, and as he stumbled backward, clutching the file like it was a venomous serpent, Chelsea tried to step toward him. Her voice cracking as she begged him to listen, to let her explain, to let her unravel the nightmare that started long before she even understood the consequences of her choices, but Adam snapped, his temper erupting like a volcano, eyes blazing, voice thunderous with pain and disbelief as he demanded to know how long she had known, how long she had let him believe Connor was unquestionably his son while Matt Miller, the man Adam had barely tolerated, the man he had always sensed was lurking too close, had unknowingly held a biological claim, and Chelsea, shaking, sobbing, pressed her hand to her mouth before confessing that it started with confusion, with a mistake she had convinced herself would never resurface, a brief lapse she had buried under guilt and fear because she hadn't wanted to destroy Adam's world, hadn't wanted to take away the one anchor he had clung to during years of heartbreak and chaos. She insisted it wasn't malicious, that she hadn't known definitively until now. That the timing, the circumstances, the emotions surrounding that night with Matt had been twisted, blurred, and suffocating, yet none of that mattered to Adam, not when the truth now echoed through the room like a bomb detonating, turning memories into shrapnel and ripping open every old wound he thought he had already fought through, and he roared at her, voice raw, accusing her of lying not just to him but to Connor, of letting him build a life around a son she knew, might not be biologically his. And when she grabbed his arm, pleading for him not to walk away, not to lose himself in rage, Adam yanked himself free with a force that made her stumble, shouting that she had taken from him the one pure connection he had, the one relationship he had never questioned, and the room vibrated with every word as he hurled accusations and heartbreak in equal measure while Chelsea, utterly destroyed, forced herself to continue confessing because once she had begun, she couldn't stop. She had to purge every lie she had told herself in order to sleep at night, every excuse she had used to justify protecting him from this truth, and as she choked out details of Matt reaching out, of suspicions he had never voiced, of the DNA test Connor had accidentally triggered during his medical evaluation, Adam felt his knees weaken, his fury warring with devastation, because suddenly he saw flashes of Connor, his smile, his stubbornness, his vulnerability, and wondered which part came from him and which came from Matt, and the thought made his chest seize with a grief so sharp he almost doubled over, but anger kept him upright, kept him roaring, kept him demanding why she didn't come to him immediately, why she didn't trust him enough to face the truth together, why she chose instead to protect a secret that could only end in destruction, and Chelsea, wiping her face with trembling hands, whispered that she was terrified, that she had watched Adam struggle again and again with identity, with loss, with the shadows of his father and the expectations of being a Newman, and she couldn't bear to be the one to cut open another wound, couldn't risk breaking him in a way she feared he might never recover from. But Adam slammed his fist against the table, the sound echoing through the room like a gunshot, shouting that she didn't get to decide what truth he could or couldn't handle, that she had robbed him of the chance to process, to protect his son, to prepare for this bomb before it detonated in their laps. And when she winced at the volume of his voice, he finally turned away, pacing with the energy of a man barely containing violence, not toward her, but toward the universe that seemed determined to punish him endlessly, and he dragged his hands down his face, whispering in disbelief, "Matt is Connor's father." Matt, as though saying the name aloud might make the nightmare clearer, more concrete, more real, and Chelsea, sniffling, whispered that biology didn't erase Adam's role, didn't change the fact that Connor needed him, that Adam was still the man who had raised him, guided him, loved him with every fractured piece of his soul. But Adam cut her off with a sharp, agonized shout, insisting that she didn't understand, that she couldn't possibly grasp what it meant for a man like him to lose the one thing he thought he had done right, the one relationship not tainted by manipulation or secrets or blood-soaked history. And when Chelsea tried to insist that Connor still saw him as his father, still needed him, Adam rounded on her with eyes that looked almost feral, demanding whether Connor knew, whether their son had been forced to carry the weight of this secret while Adam lived in ignorance, and Chelsea, pale and shaking, admitted that Connor had found out only hours before she did, that he had overheard a conversation he wasn't meant to hear, that the boy was spiraling under the weight of the truth and needed both of them now more than ever. And for a moment, just a moment, Adam's rage flickered as fear took its place, fear for his son, fear for the emotional fallout that could destroy the fragile boy he loved more than life itself. But grief snapped right back, fueling the inferno inside him, and he shouted that she had ruined everything, destroyed the family they were trying to rebuild. And when Chelsea reached for him again, telling him she loved him, that she never meant to shatter his heart, that she only wanted to protect him from a truth that frightened her too, Adam stepped back as if her touch burned him, shaking his head slowly, whispering that love built on lies was poison, and he couldn't breathe around her anymore, couldn't look at her without seeing the betrayal written across every choice she made. And Chelsea collapsed into a sob as Adam stormed toward the door, his hands shaking so violently he could barely grip the doorknob. But before he left, he turned back, his voice eerily calm, dangerously quiet, and said, "I don't know who I am in this family anymore, but I know who I'm not." And with that final blow, he walked out, leaving Chelsea crumbling to the floor and the future of their already broken family hanging by a thread so thin it seemed destined to snap with the slightest tremor. Because now that the truth was out, now that Matt's DNA had detonated every lie, nothing in Genoa City would ever be the same again. Adam didn't remember leaving the apartment, didn't register the cold night air slamming against his skin as he stormed down the sidewalk, didn't hear the roar of distant traffic or the echo of his own ragged breathing, because all he could see, all he could hear, all he could feel was the crushing weight of Chelsea's confession repeating in his head like an endless loop. Matt is Connor's father. Matt. Matt. The world blurred around him, disintegrating into a haze of streetlights and darkened windows, the city moving in slow motion as his mind spiraled into a storm so violent he could barely stay standing. And somewhere deep inside him a tiny, fragile part whispered that he needed to calm down, needed to breathe, needed to think, but the larger part, the wounded, betrayed, furious part, was drowning every rational thought, screaming at him that he had been played for a fool, that his entire foundation had been built on a lie, that the one thing he thought he had done right, being a father, had been ripped away from him with a single sheet of DNA results. He leaned against a brick wall in an alley, sliding down until he was seated on the cold ground, burying his face in his hands as a raw, guttural sound tore from his throat, half anger, half grief, and all heartbreak. He didn't know how long he sat there, trembling, trying to piece together a reality that no longer made sense. Meanwhile, back in the apartment, Chelsea sobbed uncontrollably, clutching the couch cushion as though it were a life raft, whispering apologies to no one, to everyone, to the universe, knowing she had detonated the very truth she had been too afraid to face, and now she had to live with the wreckage. She wiped her face, grabbed her keys, and rushed out the door, desperate to find Adam, terrified of what he might do, terrified of losing him forever, but even more terrified of what this revelation would do to Connor, who had already been teetering on the edge for far too long. Across town, Connor sat alone in his room at the facility, knees pulled to his chest, staring at the wall with wide, unblinking eyes, the DNA revelation swirling through his mind like a poison he didn't know how to purge. He felt sick, hollow, guilty, confused, and angry all at once, and even though the staff had tried to comfort him, nothing they said could quiet the voice in his head whispering that this was his fault, that he had never meant for anyone to find out, that he had only been curious, only trying to understand why he felt so out of place sometimes, why he struggled in ways he couldn't explain. He hadn't expected the results to explode like this. He hadn't expected to destroy his family. He covered his ears, rocking slightly, wishing he could undo everything, wishing he had never been born into a life so tangled with secrets. Back in the alley, Adam finally pushed himself to his feet, wiping his eyes roughly, rage igniting in him once again, rage not just at Chelsea, but at Matt, at the situation, at fate itself, and he marched toward the car with the determination of a man ready to confront the one person who, up until now, had been blissfully unaware of how drastically his life was about to change. Matt Miller had no idea the firestorm headed his way. He was at his studio, tuning a guitar, humming absent-mindedly as he sorted through lyric sheets, completely unaware that everything he knew was about to implode. When Adam burst through the door, Matt barely had time to look up before Adam grabbed him by the front of his shirt and slammed him against the wall with such force the pictures rattled, his voice a low, furious snarl as he demanded to know what Matt had done, what he had suspected, what he had kept hidden. Matt's eyes widened in confusion, then dread, then disbelief as Adam shoved the DNA results into his chest, the paper crinkling under the pressure of Adam's trembling hands. Matt scanned the document, his breath catching, his face draining of color, and he staggered back, muttering, this has to be a mistake, but Adam cut him off with a roar, accusing him of being a liar, of being a homewrecker, of being the man who stole his son without even knowing it, and Matt raised his hands defensively, insisting he had no idea, that he never for a second believed Connor could be his child, that the timeline didn't even make sense to him until now, but Adam wasn't an A place to listen, not when every cell in his body felt like it was on fire, and he lunged forward again, shoving Matt so hard that he stumbled over a stack of amps and crashed to the floor. Matt didn't fight back. Instead, he sat there, stunned, trying to absorb the reality that Connor, not just any child, but Connor, was biologically his. He felt sick, blindsided, terrified of what this meant, terrified for Connor, terrified for Adam, and as he pushed himself to his feet, he whispered that he didn't want to replace anyone, didn't want to tear their family apart, didn't want this truth any more than Adam did, but Adam only laughed bitterly, a sound so hollow it barely resembled anything human, accusing Matt of already taking everything from him just by existing. The confrontation grew more explosive by the second until the studio door swung open and Chelsea rushed in, breathless from running, begging Adam to stop, pleading that this wasn't the way, that Connor needed stability, not violence. Adam rounded on her with a glare so sharp it made her flinch, yelling that she had no right to tell him how to handle anything after lying to him for years, and when she tried to explain again, Adam snapped, "Stop talking. Every word out of your mouth just makes it worse." Matt stepped between them, hands raised, telling Adam he needed to cool down, that they all needed to think about Connor first, and that suggestion enraged Adam even more, because the idea of Matt preaching about fatherhood, about responsibility, felt like a knife twisting deeper into his chest. Adam shoved Matt again, but this time Matt held his ground, insisting that anger wouldn't fix anything, that Connor needed both of them, needed all of them, to keep him from falling apart. Chelsea, her voice shaking, begged Adam to come with her to the facility, telling him Connor was struggling, that he needed to hear directly from Adam that he hadn't lost his father, that biology didn't change love. At first Adam refused, too furious, too shattered to imagine facing the boy without breaking down completely, but when Chelsea whispered that Connor was hurting because he thought Adam wouldn't want him anymore, those words sliced through Adam's rage like a blade. His breath caught, his expression crumbled, and for the first time since hearing the truth, he went completely still. Connor believed Adam might stop loving him. That cut deeper than anything Chelsea or Matt had done. Without another word, Adam stormed past them both, out the door, across the parking lot, and into his car, driving toward the facility with a single mission burning in his chest. He had to get to his son. He had to fix this. He didn't know how, didn't know what it would take, didn't know if he had the strength, but he knew he couldn't let Connor drown in the fallout of adult sins. Chelsea and Matt followed in separate cars, their silence thick with dread. When Adam arrived, he nearly ran inside, pushing past the front desk and heading straight down the hallway to Connor's room, his heartbeat pounding so violently he felt it in his teeth. When he reached the door, he paused only for a fraction of a second before he walked in, and the sight of Connor curled up on the bed, shoulders shaking, shattered Adam's rage completely. He dropped to his knees beside the bed, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Hey, buddy," and Connor looked up with tear-streaked cheeks and eyes full of fear, whispering, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ruin everything," and Adam's heart cracked open all over again. He pulled his son into his arms, holding him tightly, pressing his face into Connor's hair as he insisted, repeatedly, desperately, that nothing could ever make him stop loving him, that no DNA test could change the fact that Connor was his son, his boy, the person he loved more than anything in the world. Connor sobbed into his chest, trembling violently, asking if Adam hated him, asking if Adam wished the truth had never come out, and Adam, fighting tears of his own, told him that none of this was Connor's fault, that he wasn't responsible for the choices adults made, that he hadn't done anything wrong. When Chelsea appeared in the doorway, she froze at the sight of them, tears spilling down her cheeks again, but she didn't enter, knowing this moment belonged to Adam and Connor. Matt lingered behind her, his expression filled with remorse, confusion, and a quiet heartbreak of his own. After several minutes, Connor finally calmed enough to look up and whisper, "Does this mean he's my other dad?" And Adam swallowed hard, glancing toward the hall before admitting softly that biology didn't make a father, actions did, but yes, Matt was connected to him in a way none of them had expected. Connor's face crumpled again, overwhelmed, and Adam hugged him tighter, promising they would figure it out together, promising he wasn't going anywhere. When Connor finally fell asleep against him, exhausted from crying, Adam gently laid him back on the pillow, brushing the hair from his forehead before he stepped into the hallway where Chelsea and Matt waited, their expressions tense and uncertain. Adam's face was unreadable as he closed the door quietly behind him, and after a long, heavy silence, he finally spoke, his voice low, controlled, but carrying the weight of every shattered piece inside him, as he said, "This isn't over. Not by a long shot. But from now on, everything we do is for Connor." And with those words, a fragile, uneasy truth settled over them, not forgiveness, not understanding, not healing, just the faintest thread of unity in the face of a truth that had turned all their lives upside down. And as Adam walked down the hallway, the storm inside him far from calm, one thing became painfully clear: the battle for Connor's emotional future had only just begun. But as Adam walked down the dimly lit hallway of the facility, his footsteps echoing softly against the sterile linoleum, he felt the weight of 1,000 unspoken words pressing against his ribs, suffocating him with a pressure so immense it almost made him stumble, because even though he had said the right thing, everything we do is for Connor, he knew the emotional war inside him was far from over. Forgiveness wasn't even on the horizon, trust had been obliterated, and the truth still scorched every corner of his mind like a fresh burn. Yet seeing Connor break down, seeing his son crumble under the pressure of a secret he should never have carried, shifted something deep inside him, forcing him to shelve his rage, at least temporarily, because the boy needed stability, safety, and reassurance more than he needed retribution. But the moment Adam stepped outside into the cold night air, everything he had bottled up inside him erupted again: rage, grief, betrayal, helplessness, all swirling together in a storm so violent it made his hands tremble. Chelsea and Matt followed him out seconds later, but neither dared approach him immediately. Adam stood alone in the parking lot, staring at the asphalt like it held answers, clenching his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white, and finally he spoke without looking at them, his voice low but pulsing with barely contained fury: "You both broke something tonight. And I don't know if it can be fixed." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating, and Chelsea instinctively reached for him, only to stop herself when she realized he wasn't ready, not even close. Matt swallowed hard, his voice unsteady as he tried to explain again that he never intended for any of this, that he had been blindsided, that he was willing to step back entirely if that was what Connor needed, but Adam turned toward him slowly with a glare so sharp it could have cut steel, saying, "You don't get to make decisions about Connor yet. Not today. Not until we figure out what this even means." Matt nodded with visible shame, but Adam wasn't done. He stepped closer, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper as he added, "And if you ever try to replace me in his life, even for a second, I won't hold back next time." Chelsea gasped softly, begging Adam to stop, pleading that anger wouldn't help anyone, but Adam snapped back that she no longer got to be the moral compass of this family, not after lying to him, not after dismantling their lives with a truth she hadn't trusted him to handle. Chelsea broke down again, shoulders shaking, telling Adam she had been terrified, that she had thought keeping quiet was somehow protecting him, protecting Connor, protecting all of them, but Adam shot back bitterly, "You didn't protect anyone. You just delayed the explosion." A silence followed, long, painful, suffocating, before Chelsea finally whispered, "So what do we do now?" Adam took a deep breath, his jaw clenching, his expression still carved with heartbreak, but his voice steadier as he said, "We take it one step at a time. Connor comes first. Always. No more secrets. No more lies. We tell him the truth, the whole truth, together."